There were 23 people in that dining room. I counted. And when my mother stood up and lifted her glass and said, "I want to speak about the person who made all of this possible," I thought, finally. 8 weeks. 8 weeks since I had woken up in a recovery room with a drain in my side and a nurse I had never met telling me to breathe slowly and not reach for anything. 8 weeks since my body had been opened and rearranged so that my father could live. And here, finally, at this long table with the good linen and the catered food and the candles burning low, she was going to say my name. She was going to look at me. She turned toward my brother Marcus. Her whole face opened like a window. I want to tell you what happened after that, but first I need you to understand who I was before any of it. My name is Darius Webb. I am 36 years old. I work as a community health liaison for a nonprofit in Southwest Atlanta called the Lakeview Wellness Collective, where I help uninsured families navigate medical systems that were not designed with them in mind. I make $41,000 a year. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment near Cascade Road that I share with no one, because I stopped bringing people into my life who would later discover there wasn't enough room for both of us in my family and choose to leave. That had happened before, I learned. My brother Marcus is 40 years old. He runs operations for our father's company, Webb Durable Health, a medical supply distributor our father Clarence built from a rented storage unit in East Point back in 1997. Marcus has a salary I have never been told directly but could estimate from the car he drives and the vacations he posts. He has a wife named Tamara, 3 kids, a house in Alpharetta with a backyard that photographs beautifully. And my mother Sylvia is complete, organizing, gravitationnelle attention. I have 4 Sundays a year with my parents. I stopped expecting more than that sometime around 2020, not because I gave up, because I finally understood that continuing to want what was never going to be offered was its own kind of slow damage, and I had started trying to protect whatever was left of myself. And then one evening in August, everything changed. Not because I wanted it to, because a man's body decided it was done pretending it was fine. My father collapsed at a company event I had not been invited to. Webb Durable Health was celebrating 25 years in business, 200 guests, a hotel ballroom near the airport, the kind of evening where people say things like legacy and commitment and what we've built together. I knew about the event from a LinkedIn post Marcus had made that afternoon. Something about carrying the torch and honoring the foundation. I read it at my desk, eating leftover rice and chicken, and I thought, good for him, and went back to work. At 10:17 that night, my cousin Deidre sent me a text. "Your dad passed out at the dinner. They're taking him to Grady. I thought you should know." I changed clothes in 4 minutes and drove. I got there at 11. My mother and Marcus were already in the waiting room. They were sitting close together, talking quietly, the way people do when the world has just shrunk to a single terrible point and they are orienting themselves inside it. My mother looked up when I walked in. Her face did something complicated. It wasn't relief. It wasn't exactly the opposite of relief either. It was more like the expression of someone who had not expected a variable and was now recalibrating. I walked over anyway. That was something I had learned to do. Walk toward the thing. "How is he?" I said. "They're running tests." Her voice was flat, efficient, like she was conserving energy for something that mattered more. Marcus glanced up from his phone. Barely. I found a seat 3 chairs away and waited. An hour later, the nephrologist came out. A tall woman named Dr. Anita Reeves, direct and careful with her words. She spoke to my mother, but I positioned myself close enough to hear. Stage 4, kidney failure. Significant damage. A transplant was the best path forward a living donor if a compatible family member could be identified. Time was not unlimited. She said 6 to 8 weeks before the alternatives became significantly worse. My mother looked at Marcus. "We'll do whatever it takes." I heard the word we. I noticed that I was not part of it. Just before 1 in the morning, they let us see him briefly, 2 at a time. My mother and Marcus went in first. I waited in the hallway, leaning against the wall, watching a nurse wheel a cart past without looking at me. I was very good at being in rooms without being seen. I had years of practice. When they came back out, my mother said, without meeting my eyes, "You can go in. Don't stay long." I pushed the door open. My father, Clarence Webb, was smaller than I remembered. That's the thing about hospitals, they reduce people. He was hooked to monitors, an IV line in his arm, a thin cannula under his nose. His skin had a grayish, waterlogged quality, like something had been leaching out of him for a long time, and only now had it become impossible to ignore. When he saw me in the doorway, his eyes changed. Something moved through them that I hadn't seen in years. "Darius, His voice was thin. Used up. I wasn't sure you'd come. I pulled the chair close and sat down. Of course I came, Dad. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Your mother said. He stopped, started again. She said you don't stay connected to family things much anymore. There it was. Sitting in the chair beside my father's hospital bed, I understood in one clean, clarifying second what had been happening for years. She hadn't told him I was excluded. She had told him I had chosen to leave. I'm here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. He reached out and found my hand. His grip was gentle in a way that it had never been when I was young. They say I need a kidney. His eyes went somewhere distant. I don't want to put that on you boys. I'll get tested tomorrow, I said. First thing, Darius, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, I said. I want to. He held my hand a moment longer. Then he let go. As I left the room, I passed my mother and Marcus in the corridor. I heard my mother say, quietly, to Marcus, he'll test and then find a reason not to follow through. You know how he is. I kept walking. My hands went into my pockets. I breathed through my nose, slow and deliberate, the way I had learned to breathe when I needed my face to do nothing. I did not let them see what was happening behind my eyes. I want to be honest with you right now. Because this is the part of the story where most people understandably would have stopped, would have walked out of that hospital and driven home and told themselves they had shown up, which was already more than they owed. I thought about it. I sat in my car in the Grady parking deck for a long time, engine running, city sounds pressing against the windows. I thought, why? Why keep walking into rooms where you are someone's afterthought? Why donate something irreplaceable to a family that has spent 30 years looking through you? I didn't have a clean answer. I still don't. What I had was my father's face when he saw me in the doorway, that flicker of something real, and I decided to move toward it, whatever it cost. The next morning, I called the transplant coordinator at Grady. I gave my name, I gave my father's name, I said I wanted to be evaluated as a living donor. The woman on the phone was warm and thorough. She scheduled me for the following afternoon. I didn't tell anyone. I went alone, answered every question honestly, gave blood, went through the preliminary evaluation, and drove back to my apartment, where I reheated coffee and graded intake forms for the Lakeview Collective for the rest of the evening. 7 days later, I was sitting in my car in a parking garage off Peachtree Center Avenue when my phone rang. A Grady number. I answered on the second ring. Mr. Webb, this is the transplant coordination team. We have your compatibility results. Blood type match, confirmed. Tissue compatibility score, 94%. Your kidney function is excellent across all markers. You are, medically speaking, an ideal living donor candidate. Ideal. That word hung in the air of the parking garage for a long time. I sat there and did not move. I was not celebrating. I was sitting with the full weight of what ideal meant. It meant I was about to do something permanent for a family that had spent decades treating me like a footnote. And I was going to do it anyway. Not for them. For him. And maybe I'll say this honestly for the version of myself that needed to know what I was made of. I called my father directly. He answered on the first ring. Dad, I got the results. I'm a match. I want to do this. The silence on his end was long. When he spoke, his voice had that waterlogged quality again, not from illness this time. Darius. Son. You don't have to do this. I know. I want to. Another silence. Then, your mother is going to have things to say. Lit here. 3 days later, my mother called a family meeting at the house in Cascade Heights. The four of us around the kitchen table where I had eaten 1,000 meals and felt invisible at most of them. My mother opened the meeting by listing the medical options. When she finished, I said, I'm a compatible donor. 94% tissue match. I've already completed the preliminary evaluation. I'm willing to proceed. The room went quiet in a specific way, the kind of quiet that has weight. My mother stared at me. You went and got tested without telling anyone. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. Marcus leaned back in his chair. I was going to get tested this week. He said it with the easy confidence of someone who knows he won't be challenged. And he was right. I knew for a fact that no other family members had contacted the transplant team because I had asked. But no one was going to make him prove it. My mother turned to my father. Clarence, do you want Darius to do this? My father looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, if he's willing and he's the best match, I don't want to wait. My mother looked at me then. Not warmly. More like a calculation being made. Someone who has always had trouble with follow-through shouldn't be making a commitment this serious. I stood up, gathered my jacket, and drove home. That night, my father called. "If you're sure," he said, "then let's move forward. I trust you." "I'm sure," I said. A week later, Marcus called me. His voice had that particular warmth it gets when he wants something. He said he wanted to organize a fundraiser, kidney disease, awareness, company sponsorships, local media. "Turn this into something positive," he said. "A family story." Something shifted in my chest. I didn't like the feeling. "Will the fundraiser mention that I'm the donor?" I asked. "Of course it's a family story." But the way he said family story already told me whose name was going to be at the center of it. I found the event listing online 6 days later. The Marcus Webb Kidney Health Initiative supporting the Webb family in their time of need. My name was not mentioned. Not once. Not in the description, not in the contact information, not in the social media posts that followed. The fundraiser raised $52,000. It also ran a segment on a local morning show. Marcus spoke for 4 minutes about resilience and community. A graphic on-screen read, "The Webb family's fight." I was the fight, and I wasn't in the frame. Honestly, and I mean this, if I had known in that parking garage what the next 3 months were going to look like, I don't know if I would have made the same call. I want to sit with that. I'm not sure I'm proud of the uncertainty. But I think it's true, and I think you deserve the true version. The surgery was on October 8th. Grady Memorial. 7 in the morning. I checked in alone because I had told my father the date and no one else. I didn't tell my mother or Marcus. Not out of drama. I simply did not want to spend the hour before they put me under managing other people's feelings about my body. My father was admitted the same morning, 2 floors up, 2 surgical teams, 1 kidney making a brief cold journey from my left side to his. The procedure on my end took 4.5 hours. I woke up in recovery at 2 in the afternoon. There was an incision on my left side that I could not yet see but could feel, with a precision that made the word pain seem insufficient. There was a catheter. There was an IV. There was a nurse named Gwendolyn who had kind eyes and called me baby in a way that was not condescending and almost made me lose my composure right there under the fluorescent lights. My father came through on the other side. Kidney function at 67% within 48 hours. Dr. Reeves used the word textbook. She said it twice. Nobody from my family came to my room the first day. My mother was 2 floors up with my father. Marcus sent a text at 7:30 that evening. "Heard it went well. Rest up. Rest up." My neighbor from 2 doors down, a retired schoolteacher named Miss Gloria who keeps a small herb garden on her balcony and leaves jerk seasoning at my door when she makes too much, brought me a bag of groceries and drove me home on day 4. Miss Gloria is 63 years old and has known me for 2 years. She is a better relative than most of my actual relatives. The recovery took 10 weeks. I took unpaid leave from the Lakeview Collective. I moved slowly through my apartment, slept in pieces, watched my bank account do the math. I could not stop. Medical costs, the portion's insurance declined, totaled just under $12,000. The Marcus Webb Kidney Health Initiative had raised $52,000. None of it came to me. It went to research and, as Marcus described in his press release, to support the Webb family's journey forward. The Webb family's journey. As if I had been a passenger. As if I had watched from a window while something happened to someone else. I need to pause here for a second. Because if you have ever been in a family where you were the one who showed up and the one who was never mentioned in the same breath as the showing up, you already know exactly what the next part of this feels like. You know the specific exhaustion of it. The way it doesn't make you angry exactly. The way it makes you quiet. The way you start to wonder whether visibility is something other people are given, or whether it is something you were simply born without. The recovery dinner was on December 14th. My mother's idea. Celebrate Clarence's health returning. Bring the family together. Give thanks. The house in Cascade Heights. Long table, 23 relatives, catered food, candles. My mother's good china. The kind of evening that photographs like warmth and functions like a performance. I sat near the far end of the table. My incision was 10 weeks old. Still tender in cold air. Still waking me occasionally at night with a dull, insistent reminder that something had happened inside me that could not be taken back. My father sat at the head of the table. He looked better than he had in years. Color in his face. Steady air. More present. Seeing him like that was the thing I held on to through all of it. That part was real and true and mine. Whatever else happened at that table, I had done that. And nobody could rewrite it out of existence. At 7:45, my mother stood. The table went quiet. "I want to say something," she said, "about the person who made all of this possible." I felt something happen in my chest. Something cautious and involuntary, a breath held without deciding to hold it. She turned toward Marcus. To my son, my incredible, devoted son. The one who saw what his father needed and stepped up without being asked. Who organized this community, who raised this family's profile, who showed every single person at this table what it means to protect the people you love. 23 glasses lifted. 23 people cheered. I sat at the far end of that table with a 10-week-old scar on my left side, with $12,000 in medical debt, with a body that would run on one kidney for the rest of its life. I sat there and not one person at that table looked at me. Marcus smiled and nodded and said something gracious. His wife touched his arm. Somebody made a joke and people laughed and the candles kept burning, and somewhere 2 floors up in this story my name did not exist. I put my fork down. I looked at my plate. I breathed. Slow. Even. The particular breathing of a person making a decision in real time about who they are going to be in the next 60 seconds. I had been making that decision my whole life. It had never cost me this much. I was about to stand up. And then something happened. A hand closed around my wrist. Firm. Certain. My father. He was not at the head of the table. He was beside me. He had moved quietly, without anyone noticing, sometime in the middle of the toast, and he was right there, beside me at the far end, where I had been sitting alone. His eyes were wet. Not the social kind of wet, the real kind. The kind a man produces when he has finally arrived at the moment he should have arrived at 30 years ago and knows it. He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket. He slid a folded piece of paper across the tablecloth toward me. Small, white. The kind of paper you fold into quarters when you want it to be private. He nodded at it once. I unfolded it. The handwriting was his, careful, slightly cramped, the way it always was. I've been talking to my attorney since September. The hospital social worker flagged what happened with your evaluation. I know what your mother did. You are the only one of my children who never once asked me for a single thing. That ends now. Don't stand up. Let me handle this. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket. My father was back at the head of the table before anyone realized he had moved. I picked my fork back up. I breathed. I ate. If you have ever sat in a room where you were invisible and then suddenly, in the space of 4 sentences, become visible again, not to the room, but to the one person whose sight you needed most, you know what happened to me in that moment. I don't have better words for it than that. He saw me. After 36 years, my father saw me, and whatever happened next, I had that. I was going to carry it differently than I had carried everything else. My father's attorney was a man named Jerome Alcott. Corporate law, estate planning, 20 years in Atlanta's legal community. Efficient, precise, the kind of man who charges appropriately and doesn't waste your time or his. My father called me on December 22nd. Can you come to Jerome's office the day after Christmas? 10 o'clock. I said yes without asking why. I arrived at 9:58. My father was already there. Jerome had a conference table set with 3 folders and the expression of a man who has prepared and rehearsed and is ready to deliver something that will change the shape of things. Darius, he said, your father has spent the past 3 months reviewing the ownership structure of Web Durable Health. In light of several things that came to his attention, including a report from the hospital social worker documenting a family member's attempt to interfere with your donor evaluation, he has decided to make significant changes. He opened his folder. Your father currently holds 100% of the company's voting shares. Effective February 1st, 49% of those shares transfer to you. Your father retains 49%. The remaining 2% goes into a management trust administered by Jerome's firm. Marcus's position as operations director is being eliminated. An external director will be brought in, and your father is asking if you would consider serving as board chair. I looked at my father. He was looking at the table, then at me. Because you showed up, he said, not just in October. Your whole life, Darius. You showed up and we made you invisible for it. I'm not fixing 36 years with a title, I know that, but I'm not leaving things the way they are. The room was quiet. What does Mom know? I asked. Jerome said the restructuring was within my father's authority as majority shareholder. It didn't require her agreement. My father said, quietly. She tried to stop the donation. In September, she called the transplant team and told them there was a concern about your psychological stability. She tried to get them to delay the process. I went very still. While I was already in evaluation? Yes. Did it work? No. The social worker flagged the call. She added a note to your file that the donor appeared psychologically sound but that a family member had attempted to influence the medical team inappropriately. I thought about Amy, the social worker who had paused when she asked if I felt supported by my family. I had given her a careful, measured answer. She had written something down. I hadn't thought much about it at the time. She had been watching. She had been paying attention. She had done her job when it mattered, and I hadn't even known to thank her. Okay, I said. January 1st, let's do it. Marcus found out 4 days later. He arrived at my apartment at 8 in the evening without calling first. 4 sharp knocks. I opened the door. He looked like a man who had just discovered that the floor he had been standing on for 20 years was not as solid as he had believed. Is it true? He said. Come in or don't, I said. He came in. He stood in my living room looking at my furniture, my bookshelves, the stack of medical invoices on the counter I hadn't filed yet. He looked at all of it with the expression of a man who had never actually looked before. The fundraiser, he started. Raised $52,000, I said. None of which came to me. 12,000 of which I could have used. Go ahead. He sat down on the couch without being asked. Mom told me what to do with the money, he said. She said the story needed to be about the family's response, not about you specifically. I should have pushed back. I didn't. I never do. He looked at his hands. That's not an excuse. I know that. No, I said. It isn't. I'm sorry, Darius. Here's the thing about Marcus. I believed him. Not completely. Not in a way that erased 10 weeks alone in my apartment or a toast I will hear in my head for the rest of my life. But genuinely, Marcus had spent his whole life being the one my mother pointed at and said, this one. That has its own weight, its own distortions. Being the chosen son had cost him something too, the ability to push back, the habit of thinking for himself, the chance to be a person rather than a confirmation of someone else's choices. I had never thought to account for that before. You're still losing the position, I said. That's not mine to undo. I know. A pause. What are you going to do with the board seat? Build something, I said. Starting with making sure this company takes care of people who give things up and get left out of the story. He looked at me for a long moment. You were always the one who should have been there, he said. I knew it. I just never said it. No, I said. You didn't. He left. I closed the door. I stood with my back against it for a moment, in the quiet of my apartment, and let everything settle. The restructuring finalized on February 1st. Web Durable Health brought in an external operations director, a woman named Dr. Sandra Okafor, former regional director with 15 years in medical supply distribution. The board approved her unanimously. I took the board chair position at a salary of $94,000 a year. I kept my role at the Lakeview Collective at 20 hours a week. I was not giving that up. That work was the reason I understood why any of this mattered. The first thing I brought to the board was a living donor support fund, $50,000 annually from Web Durable Health to help living donors cover medical expenses insurance wouldn't touch, lost wages, recovery costs, all of it. The board approved it in the same meeting. The first person the fund helped was a 27-year-old man named Kevin, who had donated a lobe of his liver to his sister and lost his warehouse job during the recovery because his employer wouldn't hold his position. I handed him a check for $8,000 in a conference room on Peachtree Street. He held it for a moment and then looked up. You did this? He said. Someone should have done it for me, I said. Now we do it for others. My mother moved to Savannah in March. My parents filed for legal separation the same month. My father and I have breakfast every Sunday at a diner on Memorial Drive, not far from the hospital where all of this started. We don't stay long. An hour, sometimes less. We talk about practical things mostly. The company, the fund, the weather, Atlanta traffic. Small things that are not actually small because we are choosing to share them. One Sunday in April, he put his coffee down and looked at me. I should have said it 36 years ago, he said. I'm proud of you. I looked at him over my cup. You should have, I said. He nodded. He didn't try to fill the silence with justification. I don't forgive you yet, I said. For all of it. But I'm trying to understand it. That's where I am. That's more than I deserve. Probably, I said. But you chose right in the end. That counts for something. Here is what I know now that I did not know before October 8th. I know that being overlooked does not mean being unimportant. It means the people doing the overlooking have decided their comfort is worth more than your visibility. That is a choice they make about themselves. It is not a fact about you, and you do not have to accept it as one. I know that the body keeps score. 6 inches of scar tissue on my left side, raised and faintly pink, aching when the Atlanta cold comes in wet and sideways. I don't cover it anymore. I used to. Now I don't bother. It is the most honest thing about me. It is proof that I showed up when it mattered and chose to do the hard thing when no one was watching and no one was going to credit me with it. I know that some people, a social worker named Amy, a neighbor named Miss Gloria, an attorney named Jerome, will show up for you with more real loyalty than the people who share your last name. Family is the people who act like it, not the people who simply are it by default. And I know this. When a man folds a piece of paper into quarters in the middle of the worst evening of your life and slides it across a tablecloth and writes that ends, now he is telling you, in the only language he has left, that he finally sees you. It took 36 years. It took a kidney. It took 23 people cheering for the wrong name while I sat at the end of the table and breathed slowly and made a decision about who I was going to be. He saw me. I'm not invisible anymore. I drive to the Lakeview Collective on a Tuesday morning in April, just before 7. Atlanta in early spring is wet and gray and stubborn about becoming itself. I park on Cascade Road. I get out. I can see my breath. My phone buzzes. A text from my father. Sunday. Usual place. I type back, always. I look at my reflection in the car window for a moment. I see the shape of who I am now, board chair, donor. The one who showed up when no one was watching and kept showing up after. The scar will always be there. So will I. Now, before I go, I have to ask you something, because this story has been sitting with me hard, and I need to know where you stand. Drop a 1 the comments if you think Darius made the right call, donating even after everything he knew. Drop a 2 if you think he should have waited. Force the conversation first. Drop a 3 if honestly you don't know what you would have done, because this one isn't simple. I genuinely want to read every single one of those comments. And tell me, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? I always want to know. I picture you in your city, in your corner of the world, sitting with this story, and I want to know where that corner is. If you have ever sat in a room full of people who love each other and felt like the only person in it they had not chosen, leave that in the comments too. You don't have to explain it. I just want you to know that someone will read it. If this story found you, it probably means something. It means you're someone who thinks about families and sacrifice and what it actually costs to be the one who shows up. That's who this channel is for. So if you're not subscribed yet, this is the moment, because there are more accounts like this one coming, and they are going to find you exactly when you need them to. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.